What was God's name before the creation of the world? This is a question that has puzzled many, and the answer is both mysterious and powerful. In today's Bible study, we will explore God's identity before creation, uncover names that many Christians have not heard about, and reveal the deep meaning behind them. At the end of the video, we will reveal a secret mystery behind one of the names of God and how it relates to how you breathe. This video is brought to you by the Bible Memory app, the #1 Bible app to memorize Bible verses. Click the link in the description below to access it for free. Now, the Bible reveals the names of God to us by showing His everlasting nature, highlighting His eternal and unchanging existence. He is the same yesterday and today and forever. He still bears those names today. The first name God bears before creation is El Olam, meaning the everlasting God. Have you ever wondered what God's first name was before anything else existed? Before the stars, the earth, or even time itself, God was already known as El Olam, which means the everlasting God. This name carries an overwhelming truth: God has no beginning and no end. In Genesis chapter 21, verse 33, Abraham calls upon this very name after making a covenant at Beersheba. Abraham planted a tamarisk tree in Beersheba, and there he called on the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. But what does this ancient name mean for us today? El Olam isn't just mentioned in Genesis. This title reappears in other parts of Scripture, each time emphasizing God's timelessness and infinite power. Isaiah 40 verse 28 declares, "Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary, and His understanding no one can fathom." Here, Isaiah reminds us that even when we are weak and lost, God's eternal strength is never exhausted. In Psalm 90 verse 2, we are given another glimpse into the significance of El Olam. "Before the mountains were born, or you brought forth the whole world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God." This verse draws us into the eternal nature of God. Before creation began, God was already present, stretching back into an infinity we can hardly grasp. So why does this name matter so much? The name El Olam tells us that God is unchanging, reliable, and sovereign over time. In a world that constantly shifts and changes, where we face uncertainties every day, the truth that God is everlasting brings us unshakable hope. Hebrews 13:8 reminds us that Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever, showing us that the eternal nature of God is reflected in Jesus too. God's everlasting nature means His promises, love, and presence are never-ending. In Abraham's life, this name was deeply significant. Abraham had faced many trials. He left his homeland. He waited for years to have a son, and he even almost sacrificed that very son. But through it all, he called on El Olam, the God who was always there, faithful to the end. Just as Abraham trusted in God's eternal presence, we too can rely on El Olam today, knowing that He has been with us long before we were born and will continue to be long after we're gone. The mystery and power behind this name remind us that we worship a God who is beyond time, beyond comprehension, and yet chooses to dwell with us. The second name God bears before creation is Yahweh, or I am who I am. Have you ever wondered what it means when God says, "I am"? What does that reveal about His nature? In Exodus 3 verse 14, God reveals Himself to Moses with a name so profound that it shakes our understanding of existence: I am who I am. God calling Himself Yahweh signifies that He exists beyond time, beyond any beginning or end. It's a name that carries with it both mystery and majesty, reminding us that God is self-existent. He simply is. This name, Yahweh, reappears throughout the Bible in some of the most pivotal moments. In Isaiah 43 verse 10, God declares, "You are my witnesses, declares the Lord, and my servant whom I have chosen, so that you may know and believe me and understand that I am He. Before me no God was formed, nor will there be one after me." Here, the timelessness of Yahweh is made clear. He is not bound by time or creation. No one comes before Him or after Him. His name alone declares His eternal existence. When Jesus came into the world, he echoed this very name in John 8, verse 58. When the religious leaders questioned his authority, Jesus said, "Before Abraham was born, I am." In this moment, Jesus identifies himself with Yahweh, connecting himself to the God of the Old Testament, the self-existent one. It's a powerful statement that stirred the crowd because it directly tied Jesus to the eternal God, the one who had no beginning. So what does this name Yahweh mean for us today? The significance of this name is profound. Yahweh reminds us that God is not dependent on anything. He didn't need the world. He didn't need creation. And he doesn't change based on circumstances. Malachi 3:6 says, "For I, the Lord, do not change." This unchanging nature of God provides us with a constant in our ever-shifting lives. When everything around us is uncertain, Yahweh remains the same. The name also points to God's eternal presence with his people. In Deuteronomy 31, verse 6, God says, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them, for the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you." This is Yahweh speaking, the God who is always present, who is with us in every moment. The third name God bears before creation is Ancient of Days. Have you ever wondered what it means to call God the Ancient of Days? This title, found in the book of Daniel, carries a weight that speaks of God's eternal authority, his rule that stretches beyond time itself. But why is this name, Ancient of Days, so significant for us? In Daniel chapter 7, verse 9, we get an awe-inspiring vision. "As I looked, thrones were set in place, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was as white as snow, the hair of his head was white like wool. His throne was flaming with fire, and its wheels were all ablaze." Here we see God in his majestic, eternal role as the ruler over all things, existing from the very beginning, long before creation, and even before time. This image of the Ancient of Days tells us that God's reign is endless, stretching backward and forward through eternity. In Daniel 7, verse 13, the Ancient of Days reappears. "In my vision at night I looked, and there before me was one like a son of man, coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient of Days and was led into his presence." This passage not only speaks of God's timeless existence, but also his power to judge and rule over the nations. His authority is unmatched, and his wisdom is beyond what we can grasp. It's a reminder that no matter how chaotic the world becomes, God remains the eternal King, seated on his throne. The significance of this name is not just about age or time. It's about God's unchanging, sovereign rule over all things. In Daniel 7, verse 22, we read, "Until the Ancient of Days came and pronounced judgment in favor of the holy people of the Most High, and the time came when they possessed the kingdom." This verse points us to the ultimate victory of God's people, secured by the everlasting authority of the Ancient of Days. Calling God the Ancient of Days reminds us that he has seen the rise and fall of kingdoms and the birth and death of men, and yet he remains unchanged. His reign is eternal, his wisdom is everlasting, and his love for his people, just like his covenant with Abraham, stands firm through all generations. The fourth name God bears before creation is Alpha and Omega. Have you ever considered what it means for God to call himself the Alpha and Omega? How can he be both the beginning and the end? In Revelation 1:8, God declares, "I am the Alpha and the Omega," meaning that he exists beyond time itself, before anything begins, and long after everything will end. This title captures the eternal nature of God, and it's not just a name, it's a truth that can change how we see our lives and the world around us. When God describes himself as the Alpha and Omega, he is drawing on the first and last letters of the Greek alphabet, symbolizing that he encompasses all things, from the start of creation to its conclusion. In Revelation 22, verse 13, Jesus echoes this statement, "I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end." It's a profound reminder that God has no starting point and no end point. He always has been and always will be. This eternal existence means he is unchanging, and his authority over all things is absolute. In Isaiah 44, verse 6, God says, "I am the first and I am the last. Besides me, there is no God. This statement underlines the fact that God's authority is not only eternal but also exclusive. There is no one else who holds this position. The fifth name God bears before creation is the Everlasting Father. Have you ever wondered how God can be both eternal and fatherly at the same time? In Isaiah chapter 9 verse 6, the Messiah is called the Everlasting Father, a title that seems to reveal more than just his care for us. It points to a truth so powerful: God has been a father from eternity past, before the world was created, and he will remain so for eternity to come. What does it mean for us to serve a God who is not only eternal, but also fatherly? The name Everlasting Father is profound. It doesn't just highlight the fact that God has always existed, but that his nature as a father is eternal. This is the God who knows no beginning or end, and yet his relationship with his people is intimate, protective, and filled with love. In Psalm 103 verse 13 we read, "As a father has compassion on his children, so the Lord has compassion on those who fear him." The image of God as a father stretches far beyond time. His care, mercy, and guidance have been part of his character since before the foundations of the world were laid. Another powerful reference to this idea is found in Psalm 90 verse 2. "Before the mountains were born, or you brought forth the whole world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God." This verse not only emphasizes God's eternal existence, but hints at his fatherly role. Just as he brought forth the world, he nurtures, sustains, and leads his creation like a father does his children. His fatherhood is not limited by time or circumstance. It extends through all of history and beyond. In the New Testament, we see this fatherly nature fully revealed in the person of Jesus Christ. In John 14 verse 9, Jesus says, "Anyone who has seen me has seen the Father." This doesn't mean that Jesus is literally the Father in the Trinity, but that he embodies the eternal care and compassion of the Everlasting Father. Through Christ, we experience the tender love, discipline, and guidance of God. He is the Father who never leaves, never grows tired, and never stops caring for his children. As Christians, the title Everlasting Father reminds us that we are never alone, never forgotten, and never unloved. Even before creation, God was a Father, and he continues to be our eternal Father, full of love and compassion, guiding us through every season of life. The sixth name God bears before creation is the first and the last. What does it mean for God to be both the first and the last? Have you ever stopped to think about how, before anything existed and after all things faded away, God remains? In Isaiah 44 verse 6, God declares, "I am the first and I am the last. Besides me, there is no God." This title captures the eternal nature of God in a way that transcends our understanding. It reveals that God not only exists outside of time, but also stands as the beginning and the end of all things. How does this eternal presence shape our view of him? When God refers to himself as the first and the last, he's making a profound statement about his sovereignty. Before the universe came into being, before the stars were flung into space, God was already there. He wasn't just watching creation unfold, he initiated it. The same God who existed before time is also the God who will bring history to its conclusion. In Revelation 1 verse 17, Jesus says, "Fear not, I am the first and the last and the living one." This echoes the same message from Isaiah, but now Jesus reveals himself as the embodiment of this eternal truth. Jesus, the eternal Word, stands at the beginning of creation and the end of time itself. The title First and the Last signifies more than just God's eternal nature. It's a reminder of his unchanging character. This means that the God who was at the beginning of creation is the same God we worship today, and he will continue to be the same for all eternity. His promises, his love, and his purpose do not change. This name also holds immense significance for our faith. He's not just the God who started things off and walked away. He's the God who will be there when everything else fades. In the face of uncertainty, we can trust that he knows the end from the beginning and that his plans will come to pass. The mystery of God's pre-creation existence will always leave us in awe. How incredible is it to know that before time began, before the stars were set in place, God was already there, eternal, unchanging, and all-powerful. As we reflect on names like El Olam, Yahweh, Alpha and Omega, and the first and the last, we catch a glimpse of his timeless nature and divine authority. These revelations remind us of how small we are in the grand design and how great our God truly is. John chapter 1 says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made." So the name of Jesus before he was known as Jesus was the Word. Now, if you're still watching, then you're probably waiting for the mystery that we promised at the start of this video. So here it is. One of the names of God is Yahweh, or YHWH. When you say the first part of that name, it is basically you breathing in, but when you say the last part of that name, you are breathing out. How does this relate to you? When you are born, you first breathe in and naturally say the first part of the name of God. And when you die, you breathe out and say the last part of the name of God. Every tongue will confess. If this has deepened your understanding of God's eternal nature, remember that you're not alone. Others need to hear about this too. Help spread the word by liking this video and sharing it with friends, family, or even a stranger who needs to know about God's greatness before creation. The more people learn about his mystery and majesty, the more we can all come together in reverence and worship for our eternal Creator. If this video has blessed you in any way, then click like, comment your thoughts, and hit that super thanks button.